Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. To my super chat, thank you. CNN, Feds move to subpoena former Central Intelligence Agency director and others who investigated Russia interference in Trump's 2016 campaign. The whole thing was a complete hoax. There was not a shred of evidence. Everything was fabricated, from the Steele dossier to the intelligence community assessment that Brennan used. This is a Guardian article just the other day. MAGA loyalist expands investigation into intelligence officials who angered Trump. You couldn't get a more amusing headline. Experts decry Jason Redding Quinones. Fishing expedition. Experts. Wonderful, morally superior liberals who were just fine with setting up and framing Trump. We know from the declassified Durham probe annex, and we know from the ODNI report, Brennan is mentioned, the declassified ODNI documents, that the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and the current CIA Chief John Ratcliffe, and Chuck Grassley, and others have declassified documents proving that the whole thing was a setup and a completely fabricated investigation into Trump to try to ruin his first presidency. They set up and framed an incoming president with a dossier literally purchased by Hillary Clinton, his direct political rival. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Check this out, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get to Brennan's testimony in a second.
For bad faith, deep state actors continue. Earlier today, the House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan referred former CIA Director John Brennan to the DOJ for prosecution over allegations that he made false statements to Congress about his role in the Russia collusion hoax. In his letter, Jordan said, in part, quote, making false statements before Congress is a crime that undermines the integrity of the committee's constitutional duty to conduct oversight. Anyway, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan is with us with more. I've read your letter to Pam Bondi. It is a, wow, powerful prima facie case. He directly lied to Congress numerous times, and you believe you have the evidence.
Yeah, you're not supposed to lie, Sean, but you're definitely not supposed to lie when you're under oath talking to Congress. And that's exactly what it looks like John Brennan did. He said he wasn't involved with the dossier at all. He said that to us under oath. He said he didn't want it included in the intelligence community assessment, the report that's put together. But then ODNI Director Tulsi Gabbard declassified a report that said just the opposite. In fact, John Brennan put in writing that he felt the dossier should be included in the report. And more importantly, when he was confronted by an individual who works at the CIA, and the individual said, Mr. Brennan, this dossier just doesn't hold up. There's not the underlying intelligence to support it. And Brennan's response was, yeah, but doesn't it ring true? Showing his true color, showing that he was out to get President Trump. So we think he lied. We think it's clear. And I'll be, Sean, I don't do a lot of these. I've done very few referrals. You got to have the evidence to do this. We think it's there. We think it is clear. We appreciate what Tulsi released and declassified that report. And that's why we sent it to the Justice Department. And we'll see what the Attorney General Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Blanche do with it now.
They rejected the first intel assessment. Senior career intel officials at the CIA concluded there was no Trump-Russia collusion after the 2016 election. The declassified documents say Obama himself ordered it. And didn't they include, and didn't Brennan know, and wasn't he a part of the meeting that took place about a new intelligence assessment in this case?
Yeah. They changed the report between Election Day 2016, Inauguration Day in January 2017. They changed it in December. And they changed it to say something that wasn't supported by the intelligence. And then, to make matters worse, they go up to Trump Tower on January 6, 2017, and brief the president on the dossier that they know is garbage. That someone in the CIA who's familiar with the underlying intelligence told Director Brennan, you shouldn't use this. It doesn't hold up. But his response again was, doesn't it ring true? We're going to go up, set up President Trump, and create the predicate for Mueller and all the other garbage they did in his first term. And I always point out, this is when it all began. And remember, Sean, with John Brennan, there's a pattern. We include this in our letter. I think he lied to Congressman Gowdy back in 2017 about this very subject. We include that. And the irony, of course, is he lied under oath to us when we were questioning him about a different issue. The 51 former Intel officials who signed that garbage letter saying the Hunter Biden laptop was a Russian information operation, which was pure garbage. So there's a pattern with Mr. Brennan. We illustrate that. But the clear evidence where he violated 18 U.S.C. 1001, we believe, is when he made those statements and then Director Gabbard, God bless her, released the declassified report that said something entirely different.
All right, Jim Jordan, we'll follow this closely. Thank you.
So, the declassified Durham probe annex, in addition to handwritten notes, so Comey, Brennan, they all have handwritten notes contradicting their sworn testimony. You have the declassified Director of National Intelligence report, where he lied and denied using the dossier. The dossier was literally purchased by Hillary Clinton. So, when you have these public relations headlines, MAGA loyalist, well, what was Jack Smith? A Biden or Democratic Party loyalist? They never refer, it's really unbelievable. A fishing expedition, but the fish have already been caught. I mean, it's unbelievable. Check this out. Brennan himself admitted in 2017 there was no evidence.
Mr. Director, if you could just take a quick minute before I start with my line of questioning with regard to what happened last night in Manchester, to do whatever you can, the best you can from your expert opinion, to try to reassure the American people that what we do in this country and what we're trying to do would help thwart and stop any kind of similar activity here in the future. If you could help try to put American minds at ease briefly, I would appreciate any words that you might have of advice.
Well, I would say that ISIS and Al-Qaeda and their terrorist affiliates continue to. Intelligence services were actively involved in this effort, and having been involved in many
necessarily to try to seek out and root out criminal behavior, especially now in light of the new special counsel, Robert Mueller, who would be looking into those type of things. But for us on the intelligence committees, whether it be here or in the Senate, to try to improve the intelligence community's ability to do our jobs and to make a report, a recommendation to you and the new administration as to how we better defend ourselves against what Russia and or others may be trying to do with regard to affecting our republic and our democracy.
Not one vote was altered. The NSA confirmed, even in 2016, 2017, not one vote was altered. But anyway, let's continue.
And in doing so, if we do find any kind of criminal behavior, I think that the minority would agree that that type of information would be referred to the Justice Department, which is the proper jurisdiction. But with regard to the main question at hand, in your experience with the Russian trying to involve themselves in our election, did you ever find any evidence, as the ranking member spoke of collusion while you were the director? Did you find direct evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Putin and Moscow?
And so here is the moment that every wonderful, morally superior, highly educated liberal journalist throughout the world should pay attention to. And every morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrat or leftist or progressive that truly believes that Russia interfered and that Trump colluded to defeat Clinton in 2016. The whole thing was a hoax. There was no evidence. And the congressman here is asking John Brennan if there was any evidence. Listen to what Brennan says. He admits there was never a shred of evidence to begin with.
Moscow while you were there.
Mr. Rooney, I never was an FBI agent. I never was a prosecutor, so I really don't do evidence. I do intelligence throughout the course of my career.
That has to be the most absurd statement in the history of congressional testimony. I don't do evidence, I do intelligence. Listen to this again.
Our republic and our democracy. And in doing so, if we do find any kind of criminal behavior, I think that the minority would agree that those type of that type of information would be referred to the Justice Department, which is the proper jurisdiction. But with regard to the main question at hand, in your experience with the Russian trying to involve themselves in our election, did you ever find any evidence, as the ranking member spoke of collusion while you were the director, did you find direct evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Putin in Moscow while you were there?
Mr. Rooney, I never was an FBI agent. I never was a prosecutor, so I really don't do evidence. I do intelligence throughout the course of my career. As an intelligence professional, what we try to do is to make sure that we provide all relevant information to the Bureau if there is an investigation underway that they are looking into criminal activity. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I was convinced in the summer that the Russians were trying to interfere in the election, and they were very aggressive. It was a multifaceted effort.
It wasn't an aggressive, multifaceted effort. Not even one American was influenced by any Facebook ad or Twitter bot or any type of nonsense. There's no evidence that anyone chose Trump over Clinton or decided not to vote because of any effort by Russia or any other country. There's zero evidence. No swing state, no city, no county, not one vote was altered in any way, shape, or form. And to claim that that actually happened, you need to actually have a claim and evidence to back the claim. If there was interference, how many votes were altered? Because that's what it comes down to. They've been complaining for 10 years that they lost in 2016. But Clinton herself, and the campaign, I should say, itself, the Clinton campaign literally wanted Trump. That's what they wrote in their own emails. The Clinton campaign emails were published in Politico and other places. They wanted to elevate Trump. They wanted to elevate Pied Piper candidates. Trump, Ted Cruz, and Dr. Ben Carson. So how on earth could there be a multifaceted, aggressive effort by the Ruskies if the Clinton campaign themselves wanted to elevate Donald Trump? So Russia and the Clinton campaign both wanted to elevate Trump, and that's what happened? And then we have the handwritten notes from Brennan, where he acknowledges that there was a plan. That's the Durham probe annex. A whole bunch of people conspiring in emails and documents to set up and frame Trump. It was a plan it was literally a plan. And you still have MAGA loyalists expand investigation into intelligence officials. Not that they set up and framed Trump. They angered him. It was only because they angered him, don't you know? Anyway, let's continue. This is hilarious.
And I wanted to make sure that we were able to expose as much of that as possible.
But was there intelligence that said that the Trump campaign was colluding with Moscow during their campaign?
There was intelligence that the Russian intelligence services were actively involved in this effort, and having been involved in many counterintelligence cases in the...
There's zero reason why Russia would want Trump over Clinton. If anything, a foreign adversary would want the Clintons or Democrats in office for a variety of reasons, especially because private servers with top secret intel is a national security nightmare. And Trump never had private servers. Madam Secretary did with top secret intelligence, illegally transferred onto them, almost certainly illegally transferred. You can't transfer top secret intel legally from secure government locations onto private servers. The whole thing is so outlandish and stupid and absurd. But this is propaganda that an inebriated scriptwriter would write. that the moment he wrote it, nobody would believe. But of course, millions still believe it.
in the past. I know what the Russians try to do. They try to suborn individuals, and they try to get individuals, including U.S. persons, to act on their behalf either wittingly or unwittingly. And I was worried by a number of the contacts that the Russians had with U.S. persons. And so therefore, by the time I left office on January 20th, I had unresolved questions in my mind as to whether or not the Russians had been successful in getting U.S. persons involved in the campaign or not to work on their behalf, again, either in a witting or unwitting fashion. And so, therefore, I felt as though the FBI investigation was certainly well-founded and needed to look into those issues.
When you talk about, and I'm running out of time, but hopefully I'll be able to circle back, can you describe their capabilities beyond just propaganda and actual infiltrating, whether or not there was, you had intelligence to infiltrate the campaign with capabilities beyond just propaganda? And
so any substantive question is never answered by Brennan. And the problem is because he and others almost certainly helped set up and frame Trump. And this was very similar to the WMD debacle. So we were taken on a ride, and that was in the Bush administration, led to not only foreign policy catastrophe, but devastating consequences at home in the United States. Americans, millions were sent off to never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts. So what the Bush administration did was, and they were the worst of all time. And not far behind, you have the wonderful morally superior Democrats who tried to recreate, were successful in creating a new Cold War because they lost in 2016.
Beyond just reaching out or trying to influence the news or the campaign, and how long have we known about these type of capabilities?
There's a lot of intelligence that's been built up over the years about Russia's MO in terms of trying to gain influence in Western democracies. How they've been able to use individuals, they've been able to use politicians, political parties, they've been able to use elements within the media to try to make sure that their objectives are realized. And so
their objective would be to elevate Trump, but that's what the Clinton campaign's own objective was. The whole thing is so absurd. The Politico and others, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, they all published the Clinton campaign emails. The WikiLeaks published the journalists there published those emails, and the journalists at the Guardian and the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Politico published all the campaign emails, the DNC emails, and they showed that they wanted to elevate, the Democrats and the Clinton campaign wanted to elevate Donald Trump. So how could their interests coincide with Russia's interests?
Again, knowing what the Russian MO is and has been, including in elections in Europe, I certainly was concerned that they were practicing the same types of activities here in the United States. And that's why, as I said, we set up a group in late July that included the FBI and NSA. I wanted to make sure that every information and bit of intelligence that we had was shared with the Bureau so that they could take it. It was well beyond my mandate as director of CIA to follow on any of those leads that involved U.S. persons.
Well beyond his mandate, he was accused of spying on Dianne Feinstein and Democrats 12, 13 years ago. Well beyond his mandate. Well, heaven forbid he goes beyond his mandate and sets up and frames an innocent incoming president.
But I made sure that anything that was involving U.S. persons, including anything involving the individuals involved in the Trump campaign, was shared with the Bureau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That was time expired. Mr. Schiff, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So that's an amusing exchange, but here you have Kash Patel sitting right next to Trey Gowdy during this exchange.
barriers to sharing information from the intelligence and law enforcement communities.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Too much time, Mr. Pryor. Mr. Gowdy, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, thank you for your service to our country. Let's go back to where we were a couple of minutes ago. You mentioned, or you testified that you had a conversation in August of 2016 with your Russian counterpart. You testified that you briefed at least 8 members of Congress throughout the pendency of your investigation when you learned of Russian efforts. And we'll get to that in a minute, because my understanding from your unclassed report is Russia has historically attempted to interfere with our electoral process, and they did so without coordination, collusion, or conspiring with any of the candidates. So they have a history of doing it. We'll lay that aside for a minute. 2016 electoral process. When you learned of Russian efforts, did you have evidence of a connection between the Trump campaign and Russian state actors?
As I said, Mr. Gowdy, I don't do evidence. And we were uncovering.
He doesn't do evidence. Yet 10 years later, you'll still get a Guardian article, MAGA loyalist. Expands investigate loyalists because they anger Trump, don't you know? I mean, they just angered Trump. I mean, they didn't do anything else but anger Trump. I mean, really. He never had evidence. He never had. Listen to the next 2 minutes here. He never had evidence. Ever, 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 ever. Not one shred of evidence.
Covering information and intelligence about interactions and contacts between U.S. persons and the Russians. And as we came upon that, we would share it with the Bureau.
I appreciate that you don't do evidence, Director Brennan. Unfortunately, that's what I do. That's the word we use. You use the word assessment. You use the word tradecraft. I use the word evidence. And the good news for me is lots of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle use the word evidence too. One of my colleagues said there is more than circumstantial evidence of collusion between the Russians and the Trump campaign. Now, there are only 2 types of evidence. There's circumstantial and direct. So if it's more than circumstantial, by necessity, it has to be direct. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of one of my colleagues on the other side of this very committee. Another Democrat colleague on the other side of this committee also used the word evidence, that he has seen evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. And yet a third California Democrat said she had seen no evidence of collusion. So that's 3 different members of Congress from the same state using the same word, which is evidence. And that's the word that my fellow citizens understand, evidence. Assessment is your vernacular. Tradecraft is your vernacular. You and I both know what the word evidence means. And we're not getting into whether or not you corroborated, contradicted, examined, cross-examined. We're not getting into how you tested and probed the reliability of that evidence. It's a really simple question. Did evidence exist of collusion, coordination, conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russian state actors at the time you learned of 2016 efforts?
I encountered and am aware of information and intelligence that revealed contacts and interactions between Russian officials and U.S. persons involved in the Trump campaign. That
I'm aware of the contacts. Let me think of broad, vague, ambiguous words. Contacts that potentially interfered and colluded. No, that's your phrase. Oh, that's right. That interfered. I'm aware of contacts. That's a good word. Contacts could mean anything. It could mean a casual discussion during a dinner party. It could mean anything. It could mean most of the time it means that there's no criminal activity involved. But if we use the word contacts enough, then journalists, who of course are only interested in furthering the truth, not really, will then claim that there's suspicion. And enough innuendo and conjecture could lead to actual investigations and people going to jail just from suspicion, without any evidence at all.
I was concerned about because of known Russian efforts to suborn such individuals. And it raised questions in my mind, again, whether or not the Russians were able to gain the cooperation of those individuals. I don't know whether or not such collusion, that's your term, such collusion exists.
Such collusion, that's your term. Who said that? What? What? No. This is one of the many reasons that the grand jury, the MAGA loyalists in the grand jury in Florida will indict, or about to indict, Brennan and others. The MAGA loyalists. Because he doesn't even want to fess up to, he doesn't even want to even be tied to the word collusion, because he knew back in 2016, 2017, the whole thing was fabricated. He doesn't want to be tied to it.
Know whether or not such collusion, that's your term, such collusion existed. I don't know. But I know that there was a sufficient basis of information and intelligence that required further investigation.
So he doesn't know if collusion existed, but there was enough intelligence to investigate. This is the most overt propaganda spin of all time. If there's enough evidence to suggest collusion, then there's enough evidence to convict people. There would be evidence of a money trail, for example, Uranium One. There would be evidence of like audio, videotape footage of Trump campaign officials working alongside, conspiring with foreign adversaries. There was none of that. There would be human intelligence that could testify. There was none of that. None of these things took place. So, and we know from the declassified documents that the whole thing was a setup. The Durham probe literally has people conspiring to frame Trump. And we have the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, declassifying all the evidence that shows that the Steele dossier purchased by Clinton and the DNC was the biggest part of the community assessment, in the intelligence community assessment. But anyway, let's continue.
By the Bureau to determine whether or not U.S. persons were actively conspiring, colluding with Russian officials.
Do you know the basis of that information that you share with the Bureau? I mean, what was the nature of the evidence?
I think, Mr. Gowdy, this committee has now been provided information that relates to that issue in terms of information that the agency shared with the Bureau. And that is something that is appropriately classified.
All right. And you learned that when in this chronology did you learn of the contacts between these official members of the Trump campaign, or because there's kind of a tripartite hierarchy? There's Trump himself, there are official members of the campaign, and then there are folks who represented themselves as being connected with him.
I'm not going to try to identify individuals nor try to parse it.
I don't want you to parse it. I just want you to identify the individuals. I don't want you to parse it.
I'm not going to identify the individuals because
they don't exist. Why couldn't you identify the individuals if you had intelligence that suggested collusion? Why not? One would think that you would want to, if it was beyond the purview of the CIA, you would want to send criminal referrals or send the FBI to investigate individuals that were colluded. He never had any. The whole thing was completely fabricated.
This is information that, again, is based on classified sources and intelligence.
Were they
I think
official
this has
members?
to it.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for the kind words, everybody. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, happy New Year. God bless you all. God bless even John Brennan.
Of the campaign.
I'm going to defer to current agency officials to be able to further provide to you information related to that. But my understanding is that this committee has access to the documents that we would have provided to the Bureau.
All right. Last question, because I'm out of time. We can use the word evidence. We both know what the other one's talking about.
And the current FBI director was sitting behind Trey Gowdy. So 2026 is going to see a lot of indictments, people. I'm going to try to do a live stream every single day at 11 a.m. Eastern. So set your dials to 11 a.m. Eastern every day, tomorrow, Sunday, every day. And of course, there's H.A. Goodman's other channel. So we'll be doing a lot. And 2026 will be very interesting. And God bless you all. It'll be a wonderful year, God willing, for everybody. And it's going to, the economy will turn around. The economy will be great. Scott Bessent, Trump, Lutnick, all of these people, they know what they're doing. It wasn't like, the wonderful morally superior imbeciles, 4 years prior to Trump. But you will finally have legal accountability. Legal and just accountability. And Rome wasn't built in a day. Rome wasn't built in a day. But hit subscribe to this channel. Tell your friends about this channel. And H.A. Goodman's other channel. I'll be writing also. Finally, writing again. Took a long hiatus. And so, anyway, let's continue. 26 will be a year of accountability, and you definitely want to watch this channel.
How did you test, probe, examine, cross-examine, otherwise test the reliability or believability, credibility of that evidence you uncovered?
I made sure that the components within CIA that have responsible for counterintelligence, cyber, and Russia were actively working to understand as much as possible about the reliability, accuracy of the information that they already collected and the information that was available that needed further corroboration.
We'll come back to the next round.
Too much time expired. Mr. Himes, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Brennan, for being here. It's good to see you again.
Your phishing, whatever else, so that they can then gain access to people's emails, computers.
Maybe we need to take a little bit further look into this or refer it on.
When it's in the context that there's something.
And then they characterize what they saw as having been evidence of collusion or collaboration. They'd be misrepresenting the intelligence, would they not?
I don't know what else they have seen that could corroborate or is correlated.
Only what you saw. They would be misrepresenting the intelligence, correct?
This is Congressman Turner, and so they're trying to get him to say that there's evidence of collusion. He can't say there's evidence because he made up everything. So they're trying different ways to get him to actually admit that there's no evidence. So then they've resorted to, if people were able to see what you saw, would those people, that if those people had stated after seeing what you had seen that there's evidence, those people would be wrong. Isn't that correct?
This interest, a large financial interest, a part of Russia in Cyprus. And so, again, any type of involvement of U.S. persons or companies, it would be the responsibility of the FBI and other U.S. agencies, not CIA, to follow up on that.
Finally, if a U.S. president asked any intel official not to pursue an investigation, would you construe that as obstruction?
I do not have a legal basis.
If President Obama privately told John Brennan not to do something, it certainly would not be viewed as obstruction by any Democrat.
To determine what constitutes obstruction of justice.
How would you react if a president asked you not to pursue an investigation?
I have never been asked that, and if I was, I certainly would not. I would not follow such a directive.
Thank you. I yield back.
Jimmy yields back. Mr. Turner, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Brennan, and turning back to
where are all the resignations during Biden's tenure or President Obama's tenure? There are no resignations, and maybe one or two, maybe, that were not glorified or not even touched upon by media. Where are these resignations that publicly state that President Obama or Biden's actions were immoral? You just don't see that. God. So that would mean that everything they did was moral, which is hilarious, or that they walk in lockstep, Democrats, alongside media, or media walks in lockstep with Democrats, and the public relations monstrosity is so powerful and great that it was able to set up an incoming president in 2016 and accuse him, Trump, of doing something he didn't do.
the exchange that you had with Mr. Gowdy. You stated, and by the way, I want to also thank you, as others have, for the specificity that you provide to us. These are difficult issues and concepts, different standards, intelligence assessments, evidence. We've got the FBI, the CIA. Each of you do different jobs, and your expertise is certainly helpful to us to unwind, as we're dealing with elements of this, what we're looking at and what this means as we try to move forward with an investigation. So you indicated that you saw, when asked about whether or not you'd seen evidence of collusion or collaboration, you said that you saw intelligence that indicated that there had been contacts with individuals, with Russians, that were of a nature that bore investigation. You said that those contacts might have been benign, might not have been, but they rose to the level of indicating that they need to be reviewed for their nature and looking into an investigation. Did I characterize that correctly?
Yes, but I don't want to take this out of context. We see contacts and interactions between Russian officials and U.S. persons all the time. It is when it's in the context that there's something else going on. And so we knew at the time that the Russians were involved in this effort to try to interfere in our election. So with that background,
why would the Russians fear Clinton? Nobody's ever explained that. They invaded under Biden. Why? So why would Trump be advantageous to Russia? Why? Oh, well, he wants NATO to pay its fair share. He wants, but okay, so with that logic, when President Obama won in 2008, he wanted a Russian reset. Did that mean that Putin wanted Obama? Every president has a different foreign policy. That's why you choose. That's why every 4 years we have a choice. But anyway, let's continue.
Backdrop and increasing indications that they were involved in that, seeing these types of contacts and interactions during the same period of time raised my concern.
Excellent. I appreciate that qualification. But if someone left this hearing today and said that you had indicated that those contacts were evidence of collusion or collaboration, they would be misrepresenting your statements, correct?
They would have misheard my response to the very good questions that were asked of me. I'm trying to be as clear as possible in terms of what I know, what I assess, and what I can say.
So you would say that's a misrepresentation of your statement, yes?
I would say that it was not an accurate portrayal of my statement. Absolutely. Excellent. It was inconsistent with my remarks.
So let me go to the next step. If someone saw what you saw, and only what you saw, with respect to those contacts, if they looked at the intelligence that you saw, where you said it might have been benign, might not have been benign, and then they characterize what they saw as having been evidence of collusion or collaboration, they'd be misrepresenting the intelligence, would they not?
I don't know what else they have seen that could corroborate or is correlated.
Only what you saw. They would be misrepresenting the intelligence, correct?
I presume they would be misrepresenting what it is that I saw. Again, I don't
Excellent.
know.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because I do believe that there are members of this committee that deserve that counsel, because your specificity gives us an understanding of what we're reviewing. And I do believe that there are those who review some of the information that you have have seen and represent it to the public absolutely incorrectly and misrepresent it. And I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to Mr. Gowdy.
So that was a great exchange, and you know what? It still didn't prevent 10 years of indoctrination. The initial 2 to 4 years after this hoax was perpetrated. Then you had the Mueller probe. Then there was definitively no evidence. Mueller found no evidence, completely exonerated Trump, which is hilarious because they're like, oh no, he wasn't exonerated. Again, even these words can be manipulated depending on what side of the political divide you're on. But anyway, let's continue.
Received a criminal referral from DNI Tulsi Gabbard regarding bombshells that the Obama administration manufactured the Russia collusion narrative with Donald Trump, both before and after the 2016 election. The DNI told me initial intelligence showed Russia did not try to change the outcome of the election, and the Obama team knew that. The knowledge was pulled from the president's daily briefing due to what they called updated guidance. The next day, top national security officials met with Obama's cabinet, where President Obama asked not if, but how Russia tried to upend the election. Here's then President Obama speaking from the briefing room back in 2016. Watch.
At the beginning of the summer, we're alerted to the possibility that the DNC has been hacked. And I immediately order as well as our intelligence teams to find out everything about it. So if you started seeing effects on the election, you might want to take this into account. We allowed law enforcement and the intelligence community to do its job without political influence. When we had a consensus around what had happened, we announced it, not through the White House, not through.
And the Steele dossier was part of the Steele dossier was literally purchased by Clinton. And in handwritten notes by Brennan and Comey, they admitted that they knew of a plan created by Clinton to set up and frame Trump.
Through me, but rather through the intelligence communities that had actually carried out these investigations.
Did Clinton lose because of the hacking?
I'm going to let all the political pundits in this town have a long discussion about what happened in the election.
Joining me now is Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. Mr. Chairman, always a pleasure. Good to see you. What do you make of watching the deja?
Really quickly, it's important to remember, this is just the other day. MAGA loyalists expand investigation into intelligence officials. They've essentially already indicted Brennan. It's just a matter of seconds, days, months, but it's almost certain. The declassified Durham probe annex has all the discussion. You can look at it. It's the Senate Judiciary. You can look at all the information that Chuck Grassley and others made public. Okay, we might look at it later today. In the next live stream. But these are documents and emails of people who are actually conspiring, not conspiring like Trump and Russia, which was a word used to kind of foment suspicion without any evidence. This is actual evidence that people set up and framed Trump. Like, not just evidence, it proves that Trump was set up and framed. Because they're talking about setting up and framing Trump. They're literally stating, yeah, this will work. This would get people to believe that he committed a crime that he didn't commit. Then you have the declassified Director of National Intelligence information. He lied about using the dossier. There's witness testimony. There's whistleblower testimony. So you have declassified documents. You have handwritten notes. and you have a whole bunch of information, evidence to convict. So when people say, oh, nothing's ever going to take place, Rome wasn't built in a day. Okay, and this article was just yesterday. Okay, it's happening, ladies and gentlemen, in slow motion, but it's happening.
Deja vu of Barack Obama back in 2016.
Well, I think the former president used the term updated guidance. I think that's a fancy way of saying we changed the story and we did it for political reasons, because that's what it looks like. Never forget, there's 3 key dates here, Maria. December 9th is when they have this meeting in the White House. Clapper, Brennan, McCabe, Comey, the president, they're all there, and they say, okay, we're not going to accept the intelligence community assessment. We're going to change that. And President Obama was just alluding to that. And then you have the date January 3rd. A few weeks later, Chuck Schumer goes on one of the Sunday shows and says, talking about then President-elect Trump, he says, if you mess with the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. And then 3 days later, January 6th, they all go up to Trump Tower to give President Trump what he believes is his incoming defensive briefing as the new, as the president-elect. He thinks he's getting the normal defensive briefing. Instead, it's a setup. They go up there, talk to him about this, and then Comey tells him about the dossier that they already know is baloney. They know it's not true. Came from the Clinton campaign and everything else. But they brief him on it so that when that information gets leaked, it has added credibility, because now it was so important that the FBI talked to the president-elect. The press has got to report it. And off and running goes the Russia collusion false narrative for the next 2 years. It was all to undermine President Trump and his presidency. And God bless Tulsi for sending this to the DOJ. I hope they dig into this. I hope that they go after this, because I think this is what it was, a conspiracy to undermine the first term of President Trump.
Throw it as hard as you want. Go on.
Look, at the time, the mainstream media went with it, hook, line, and sinker. And, of course, much of the media blasted it across the world. Not here, of course. We saw through it right away and reported accordingly. Yeah. But, we've been calling for accountability now since then. It's almost 10 years, Congressman. So it now falls to AG Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel on whether or not anything will actually be done about it. What are the odds?
Yeah. Well, I think they are digging into this, and I think that the facts are strong. Here's some other evidence I think is important. This was a setup when they went up there on January 6th to Trump Tower and gave President Trump this briefing. Yeah. It was a setup because a few weeks later they did the same thing to Michael Flynn, and Jim Comey then bragged about it. He said, when we went to the White House, he said we should have called the White House counsel. We should have let him know. We should have talked about this. He should have had a lawyer. All this should have been happening, but they just said, no, we thought it was a new administration. We could get in, we could get out, we could ask him questions. And there's even email correspondence amongst FBI agents from that time with General Flynn where they say, what's our goal? Are we trying to get him to lie? What's our objective here? They were setting up Michael Flynn just like they tried to set up the President of the United States. So this is what this whole operation was about. And again, let's hope that they dig into this and get all this information out there. And if they can prove that there's a crime, I hope they move forward with it.
Now, is this why they raided Mar-a-Lago in 2022? Because they wanted these documents that were sure to be declassified?
I don't know. I do think when you go back to this, what we're talking about in 2016, 2017, it's about a 30-day time period between that December 9th meeting, 2016, and when they go up to up to Trump Tower and do this briefing. I do think this is when the weaponization of government really began. This is when they said, forget the election. We're going to try to undermine his presidency now. Wow. It was bad enough what they tried to do spying on his campaign during the 2016 campaign. But now they're trying to undermine him after he's already won. So I do think that's when it all began.
Yeah, so, it's interesting because the bulk of these declassified documents reveal that, number one, they knew that the dossier was fake. They knew it was made up. And also they revealed that the FBI did not really investigate former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton for her private email server, right? So both of those things were happening at the same time, and it was during a contest between the two players, Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley said under Comey's leadership, the FBI failed to perform fundamental investigative work and left key pieces of evidence on the cutting room floor. So is that the gist of this 10 years later, that they tried to take down Trump by making up and manufacturing this story that was not true? They knew it wasn't true, but they pushed it through and let it go viral across the world, while at the same time completely ignoring her use of a private server who she kept in her house, and that was quite dangerous. Tell us why.
Yeah, they spied on an opposing party's presidential campaign. Yeah. And the evidence they used to get the warrant to spy on them was the Clinton campaign hired the law firm Perkins Coie, who hired Fusion GPS, a Democrat public relations firm, who hired a foreigner, Christopher Steele, who put together the garbage that became the dossier. And then they used that dossier to go spy on the other party's campaign. Meanwhile, they didn't go after Hillary Clinton for her emails and everything else she did from the server. That's what they did. And then when that didn't work, they said, oh, now we're going to undermine his presidency by concocting this story, going up to Trump Tower, giving him the defensive briefing that he's supposed to get. President Trump thinks that's what's happening, when in fact it's a setup, just like they set Michael Flynn up 3 weeks later. That's what this group did. And again, Tulsi now is highlighting the underlying intelligence and said there was nothing there. But the meeting in Obama's office, they all decided to change that. No. We're not going to send out that initial intelligence community assessment. We're going to put together a new one that will allow us to do what I just described.
Well, look, Hillary Clinton was ultimately accused of mishandling highly classified information while using a private email server set up in her home. In 2016, the FBI suggested to the DOJ that she should not face prosecution ahead of the presidential election. So there, I guess they found religion on not getting involved in a presidential election. But look, at the end of the day, this has been an exhausting 10 years because of all of these shenanigans, Congressman. You know that. You've been living it. So have I. And the audience as well. So how is anybody supposed to trust that there's actual, real, work going on and honest work, and it's not all politics? I mean, you have to remove the people, don't you? Who should be getting fired? Putting indictments and prosecutions aside, who needs to get fired and leave Congress for all of these lies?
Well, I do think that I've said this multiple times. I do think it's night and day compared to the kind of work you're seeing from Attorney General Bondi, Todd Blanche, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino at the Justice Department, compared to Merrick Garland and Christopher Wray. But this whole pattern that we've seen of going after President Trump, they spied on his campaign, then they tried to undermine his presidency with what I just described. Then it was the whole Mueller investigation for 2 years. Then in the 2020 election, it was the 51 former intel officials, Clapper, Brennan, signing this crazy letter saying it was a Russian information operation when they had the Hunter Biden laptop. They knew it was real. And then once that happens, when he's running again in 24, it's Alvin Bragg, Fonnie Willis, Jack Smith, and all the things they did there. It has never stopped. But where it started is what Tulsi is now bringing forward. Stuff we suspected. We had some of the evidence, but she has even more.
We will continue later today, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be doing 2 to 3 live streams a day from here on out. And I am going to, this is just yesterday, this article. It's happening, ladies and gentlemen, even though, I have been telling you for 10 years, close to 10 years now, that this would take, it's about 10 years too late, but you know what? Better late than never. And, what can I tell you? God bless you all. Have a beautiful day. I'll be back. We'll probably do a live stream about 4 p.m. Eastern or so, 5 p.m. About 5 p.m. Eastern. Hit subscribe to my super chat. Thank you. Paul Bartlett in Australia.